number 32, and some of the other large adult males. We haven't really seen them during the broadcast, so that's why we're, these younger bears, in the jacuzzi, for instance, are able to perhaps find better fishing opportunities today. So both bears now on the lip with the salmon, taking their time eating it. And it looks like 128 is right back at it. It is really amazing to see, again, how much food these bears can pack inside of their stomachs. And while 128 and 409 are fairly large females, they are dwarfed by the bigger adult males at Brooks Falls. Some of the largest adult males may weigh twice as much as these females. So these are pretty big bears, especially if you're on a trail and you see 128 walking towards you, or 409, which happens at Brooks River more frequently than you see on the cams. It does happen quite a bit. So these are big bears, but the large adult males are definitely going to be pushing 1,000 pounds or more in the fall quite easily. In fact, a large adult male in midsummer, so like right now in Katmai, that is going to weigh 700 to 900 pounds. So these are some of the largest bears in the world. And you can never quite tell who's going to become, the largest bear. It could be just kind of a little runt of the litter. It could be one of, one of 435 Holly's cubs, still down at the mouth of Brooks River. A lot of bears are genetically predisposed to grow really, really big, but just like in people, it varies. So some people don't grow as big as others, or as tall as others, or as heavy as others, and it's the same thing in the brown bear world. While we have averages for sizes in brown bears, it really just does come down to genetics and food availability. So these bears, over time, have been genetically selected to grow bigger, because if you're a bigger bear, you can gain access to more food resources and mating opportunities. But, again, genetics and food play a large role in that. And I'm going to stick with you for, I think, another 15 more minutes or so. If you joined the broadcast late, my name is Mike Fitz, and I am a fellow with Explore.org, and I'm a former park ranger at Katmai National Park, and I've worked in several national parks in my career, but I've worked at Katmai the longest. So this is a place that's very near and dear to me, and I'm happy that I can share my enthusiasm and knowledge with everybody who happens to be watching the bear cams. Right now there are several camera operators that are very happily moving the cams around so we can see different things, talk about different bears. And I'm not at Brooks River at the moment, so I'm actually at a different location and just able to log in and see the cameras and narrate the bear and salmon activity. We're looking at number 480 Otis right now. He's gained, like all the bears that we've talked about so far, he's gained a lot of weight this year. In fact, to give a little bit of a comparison, I do have a photo of him up in the queue that I can show you. So this is number 480 here in late June. So compare his pot belly that we just were looking at to this picture here. You can see that he's gained a significant amount of weight. Bears, when they return to Brooks River in late June, are at their skinniest point of the year typically. And over the course of July, you see them getting fatter on a daily basis. Can't quite see them kind of grow, but it almost looks like it from time to time. And these bears are taking on thousands of calories per day, tens of thousands of calories per day by eating these very calorie-rich, fresh from the ocean sockeye salmon. Each one of these salmon, if they were to eat the whole fish, is about 4,500 calories. So you end up eating just a few fish per day, you can gain a significant amount of energy. Not much has changed downstream, it looks like. Still a bunch of bears waiting for any scraps that happen to drift down their way. Looks like number 717 on the far side there. And then some, looks like perhaps unidentified subadult bears that maybe will receive new identification numbers this year because they look young enough that they might not have been independent bears last year. So this might be their first summer. And cubs are not given identification numbers at Brooks River because cub mortality is fairly high. It's difficult to track them as they grow. Some of those things happen to subadults, but their survival rate is actually much higher. Once they sort of reach independence, their survival rate is very high, and once they reach adulthood too, their survival rate is greater than 90% per year for an adult female, for instance. So they still face a lot of risk and challenge in their young lives, not the least of which are younger or larger bears, but they are able to remember where their mother took them to find food. They have really great memories. And with so much food in the ecosystem, it doesn't look like any of the bears this year are really going to be hurting for calories once they go to the den. And downstream, back at the mouth of the river, it looks like 435 is laid down. Her cubs are still kind of poking around on that spit of gravel. That area is a spot where many bears will go to rest, especially in the fall when they're feeding on dead and dying salmon in this area. It's open. There's often a breeze. There's less biting insects. They also have the opportunity to see and hear and smell bears coming along, so the lines of sight are really great. So this is again an area where tons of bears love to rest. And if you're planning on visiting Brooks River in the future, I would not recommend actually walking out on this area. It's sometimes very tempting to do so, especially when you don't see any bears in the area. But you can walk out on this spit of gravel, and then you're stuck in between water and bears if a bear comes out of the forest, for instance. So I tend to avoid this area because of that reason, because I don't want to have to go swimming to avoid the bears. So even though it might be very tempting to go out and walk in this location, especially in September, I would not recommend doing that. So standing on the wildlife viewing platform where the camera is located is probably the best place to get the views of these bears at the mouth of the river. And also it's the easiest for the bears to work around us because we're not sort of interfering with their movements nearly as much. And we're looking back up at Brooks Falls now. .409 still on the lip. Looks like another adult female right down below her, kind of closest to the camera, moving back and forth. When there's a lot of salmon that tend to be trying to jump the waterfall, they'll try in a bunch of different locations, even though they're only really sort of successful right where that big plunge pool is. But where on the sort of like the left lower corner of the screen where there's a lot of whitewater there, when salmon densities are really high at Brooks Falls, salmon will try to swim up in that spot. And you will see bears fishing there. Looks like a younger bear just jumping in the water, trying its hand in these different locations. And I do really like watching the younger bears learn to fish the falls. Older bears will learn to fish the lip the waterfall in different ways too, but they tend to be more set in their ways than younger bears. Younger bears are still very much curious about their world, exploring their world, testing their boundaries, testing their skills around other bears. So you'll see them; they're much more likely to try to fish in different locations than an adult bear that is very practiced and knows that if it goes to specific spots, it's going to be able to be successful. And down at the mouth of the river, again, all of these bears are waiting for more salmon to move upstream, and there's a lot of salmon that have moved up into Brooks Falls, but you can see just a lot of fish hanging out right below the bridge where this underwater cam is located. And this is really one of my favorite cameras because it gives me a perspective that I didn't really have the opportunity to see even when I am at Brooks River. At this time of the year, most of these fish are sockeye salmon, and you can see some that are transitioning into their spawning colors. In fact, there's one in the screen that has a slightly green head and red body, and that's a salmon that's getting close to its spawning time. There's another one at the lower left corner that's approaching that. You might see some different species of salmon at this time of the year. If you see a salmon moving through that has a white belly, that is a pink salmon. And that's probably the most distinguishing feature of the spawning colors of a pink salmon. And maybe a few hundred of those move into the Brooks River each year. In just a few weeks, too, look for silver salmon. Silver salmon will have a lot of spots on them. They'll be larger than the sockeye salmon. And in their spawning colors, they are gorgeous as well. They have sort of greenish backs and more reddish sides. Just a kind of a rainbow of colors on the silver salmon. So very beautiful fish. And there is a very dark bear in the far side of the waterfalls standing behind number 480 Otis. This one just looks to be very shed out. I think this is actually a young adult male. I think this is number 503. And he's a bear that I very much enjoy watching his story because I've said this many times, but it's always worth reiterating, he is a bear that was emancipated or separated from his mother as a yearling and then was adopted by 435 Holly, who we saw and is still at the mouth of the river. So 503's adoptive mom with a new litter down at the mouth. And then, 503 right now, Upper Brooks Falls as a healthy, independent, and a very large young adult male. He's only 6 years old right now, but he's a big bear for his age, and he's very skilled at fishing the waterfall. He's one of those bears that seems to be gaining the skills to fish in almost every location. We've seen him fishing on the lip of the waterfall, in the far pool as you see him right now, in the jacuzzi. And he's growing so large that I suspect that he really does have the potential to be one of the largest adult bears on Brooks River. So give him a few more years. He still has a lot of growing to do. But when he reaches about 13 years or so, I think we can expect 503, if he's still around, to be a very large bear. And 480 at the bottom of the screen, just chewing on a fish. He can't eat his fish nearly as efficiently as the younger bears because he doesn't have as many teeth. His teeth are worn down or broken, especially his canines. We noticed that he's missing a couple of canines, so that impairs his ability to chew fish. And you can, but a bear like 503, who's only a few years old, very easy for him to strip the skin off of the fish, eat the eggs, because his teeth are all there. They're all very sharp. But worn down teeth and broken teeth is certainly an ailment that all bears that are older have to deal with. And in fact, it's very, very common for bears to have missing teeth, broken teeth, deep cavities. So sometimes that can be one of the things that hinders a bear's ability to gain enough weight to survive. But 480 this year, it doesn't look like that's going to be much of an issue for him because, again, he's gaining so much weight. And 503 is well on his way to becoming a very fat bear this fall. I recognize him, again, by his sort of blonde ears, but his blonde ears are swept back a little bit. More so, and again, he's a sort of a younger bear, so more so than the older adults. You can actually see compare where his ears are positioned on his head compared to number 480 in the front of the screen. So Otis's ears are much more oval shaped, and they're set more on the side of his head than 503. 503's ears, when you get a good look at him, currently still on the top of his head, and they're much more crescent shaped. So if you get a good view of his ears, those are sort of those identification characteristics that might help you to pick him out of the crowd. And we were able to see a lot of bears during the broadcast. Again, it's the 27th of July, 2018. So bears are going to start to disperse away from Brooks River as salmon become accessible in a lot of different fishing locations, a lot of different salmon streams. We'll have salmon in them spawning within a matter of days, or certainly just within a matter of a few short weeks. So once that migration period is sort of over in Brooks River, Brooks Falls will no longer be the best place in the area to fish. So a lot of bears will move away from this area, from the falls, to go fishing in different locations. So we can start to expect to see fewer and fewer bears over the next week or so. But it does depend on the strength of the salmon run and how many fish are still trying to migrate beyond Brooks Falls. We're also seeing that the bears so far this July have been very successful. A lot of pot bellies on them, a lot of weight gain. We looked at some pictures earlier of 480 and 409 and how much thinner they were compared to right now. So they're definitely gaining quite a bit of weight and well on their way to having a successful summer and gaining enough fat to survive winter hibernation in spring next year. We also were able to look at 435 down at the mouth of the river with her 2 yearling cubs, and they're all taking a rest right now in an open area where they have good lines of sight. They can see, hear, and smell other bears coming, and it's also fairly windswept in that location, so less biting insects or fewer biting insects for them to have to worry about or get bothered by. We took a look at some of a little bit of the underwater camera, and I encourage you to watch that for bears swimming by, different types of salmon that might be moving into Brooks River. And today has been a very successful day for a lot of these bears. 409 beadnose, we saw her at the beginning of the broadcast fishing the lip of the waterfall, eating salmon, and she's still doing that. So she's been taking in thousands and thousands of calories just during this hour-long broadcast. So again, this is a good day for a lot of the bears at Brooks Falls, and I think we will continue to see bears being very successful in gaining the calories that they need to survive. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining me on the broadcast today. Again, my name is Mike Fitz. I'm a fellow with Explore.org in the bear cams in 2018. I'm a former park ranger at Katmai National Park, and I love sharing my knowledge of the bears and salmon with everybody who's watching the bear cams around the world. So no matter where you happen to be, thanks for joining me today, and I will talk to you soon.